PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
I love numbers, PLD. I love numbers. You know why? I love numbers because every time I see the numbers pop up on the screen, suddenly it means I'm going to talk about movies with you, PLD.
That's right. It does get me a little excited. I'm not going to lie. The numbers counting down. They don't know what we're talking. I'm going to tell them right now. The numbers on the what we use for this show, we hit record. It gives us a good countdown, and it does get us excited. Countdown. A 6-second countdown. So we're ready to go. And yeah, it means we're talking movies. And we are back here.
It means that in 6 seconds, you can get PLD and I very excited about things, which I don't know is good or bad, depending on how you're looking at it.
Well, it's a funny thing. You get us excited in 6 seconds, but then we end up lasting for about an hour and a half, 2 hours talking about it. So maybe it is pretty good.
Right. That's true. That's true. We last a little while, you know. We may be two mediocre white dudes, but we can go the distance.
Definitely got the distance. And here we are in season 2 of, if you want to call it as that, of two mediocre white dudes on a film. We got through Scream, and I'm excited about that. So we decided our next journey through a franchise would be the Conjuring Universe. And I think that we decided that because I'm going to say something, maybe it might be a hot take. It's the most consistently delivered horror franchise of the past decade.
I would say that that's pretty much accurate. I actually think it's interesting that we went from Scream to Conjuring because outside of Scream, Conjuring probably is like the most consistently performing modern horror franchise to date. Correct. And so there's a lot to like about these movies. And I'm just a really big fan. And I think it's funny because if you think about it, Insidious also exists, which is also James Wan. That's also his baby. There's 4 of those. And they also are fairly consistent. And maybe one day we'll talk about the Insidious movies too.
We will. We definitely will.
I'm always going to find it interesting. Yeah. I just think it's interesting that he made 2 haunted house style series that couldn't be more far apart from what they're doing.
Well, one's very supernatural. One's based on, well, I don't want to say real life because there's, it's based on real life. That's in quotation marks. You know what I mean? But it's inspired by.
No, it's all real.
It's
all real, Paul. They told me it was real. They said it was based on a true story, so it's all real.
What a trope! What a trope that horror films use sometimes. It's a good one, and here's why. I'm going to say, without going into any further plot details or whatever, I feel like when people do that, they say it's based on a true story, or even if it's loosely based on a true story, it does give you that sense of this could happen if you let yourself believe it. And if you let yourself believe it,
100%.
Then you're in already for the film and you want to take this journey.
Dude, no doubt at all. I mean, I think that's it with most of these kind of based on a true story things, but especially horror, because when you say it for a horror movie, suddenly you're like, wait, what? Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is based on a true story that happened? They couldn't have made that further from like any of the actual Ed Gein story stuff in life. But like, you hear that and it's terrifying. This idea that someone was like Leatherface killing teenagers and stuff, you immediately buy into it and it works. This is a weird hot take now that we're on the subject. Have you seen was it like 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 2004?
Yes. I remember when.
Yeah, the Michael Bay one. Hot take, and I'm going to sure piss some people off. I actually think that not only is one of the best horror remakes maybe ever, I think it's actually better than the original.
Wow, that is a hot take.
I think it leans in. You know why? It leans in on the like inspired by a true story thing, and that whole opening and closing of real footage being used of like cops going into the home and all of that being like lost footage. Oh, dude, it still creeps me out. Like something about it just gets under my skin, and it's funny because I think that's Marcus Nispel who directed those.
Pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah,
that sounds right.
Yes, Marcus Nispel.
Yeah, who also did Friday the 13th.
The remake. Yep. He knows how to make a remake of a horror film, I guess.
Yeah. He knows how to make them scary too.
I will say I saw that one once way back when. I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. I mean, I definitely Texas the Original was one of the first horror movies I ever really watched, and so it does hold a big place in my heart just for the grittiness and the griminess and the filthiness of it. But I get what you're saying, and I actually want to read. That's another. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another series I want to revisit with you. Go through that franchise. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of different films over the years and different takes and different direction styles, and I think it's definitely a worthwhile discovery. So I think we definitely.
I'm telling you right now, I'm with you. I'm about it, but I'm gonna need to have something bookending both sides of that is like much happier than all those movies, because I can't tell you that if there's any other franchise that makes me feel as disgusting as I do when I watch those movies.
Fair enough.
And I don't mean that in like a bad way, but because of what you just said, it's dirty, it's grimy. They feel so like that original it's so haunting and so like I feel gross after I watch it.
Yes,
it makes me feel disgusting, and so it really puts you through a ringer. This is not a Texas Chainsaw Massacre podcast, but here we are.
6 minutes in, we're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Part of the course. I just think that we're going to need to have something nice on both ends, because honestly, those movies just make me feel so bleh by the time I'm done, that especially if we do them all like kind of back to back to back to back, especially some of the newer ones where it starts to be like there may or may not be necrophilia involved, and like that's a whole angle that is something.
Well, you know what?
I'm telling you right now, huh?
We can bookend them, because that's one of our announcements we made the other week. Is that
I know
in between our franchises, we're gonna do a little palate cleansers with little Ed Harris and a little Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, goddamn right we are. Goddamn right we are. So maybe we'll do like Sky High or something. It doesn't have to be in order. It could just be anything. What was I gonna say though? I totally had you interrupted my train of thought.
I'm sorry, my bad.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm still convinced Rob Zombie should have made a Texas Chainsaw movie.
Yeah, you've said it to me multiple times, and the first time I heard you say that, I was like, I didn't think of it myself, but completely agree.
The more I think about it, I'm just like, man, how did that not happen? And I just keep thinking about it because, like, look, I fucking love House of a Thousand Corpses. I'm one of the few people who actually prefers House to Devil's Rejects. Mm-hmm. I love House of a Thousand Corpses.
Right.
And it feels like a love letter in a way to Texas Chainsaw. So maybe that was him doing Texas Chainsaw. Like maybe it was his own version of doing it.
Makes sense.
But all the same, like I think of all the characters for him to have tried to play with, Leatherface just makes so much more sense.
I agree. And well, I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of more conversations about that when we do the Halloween franchise later on, because we'll be covering those zombie films.
I'm just a man of opinions, Paul. Okay, look, that's how I am.
House of a man of opinions.
Goddamn right, House of a Thousand Opinions. We should put that on a shirt. It should be two mediocre white dudes present House of a Thousand Opinions.
I love it. I'm all on board. Merchandising.
By the way, yeah, merchandising. If you've ever seen Spaceballs, we're on Spotify.
That's right. We are now finally on Spotify. If you hear us on Spotify, should soon be on Apple Podcasts.
I'm sorry.
On Google Podcast. It was my fault. I blame PLD.
I just mean I'm sorry because it means more people are going to find us. So I'm sorry that they're listening to us.
That's true. That's true. If they still are at this point, because here we are, and we haven't even talked about the Conjuring yet beyond the initial get go. But I got a way to bring us in. Hear me out. I'm bringing us back. Leatherface 2017.
That's not the style of this show.
Just hear me. Leatherface 2017 features Lily Taylor, who is Carolyn Perrin in The Conjuring.
That was a nice seg. I'm going to give you that. Wow, nicely done. I don't think I've actually seen that one. That's interesting. I didn't know she was in it.
I only saw it because I looked at her filmography the other day. I was looking at this film.
That makes sense. Well, I got to say, super excited though, because we're in the way back machine of 2013.
Yes,
the way back machine. Wow, number one. How is this movie 9 years old?
And how do we have 8 Conjuring films in 9 years?
Yeah, well, that's what you call exponential growth and
Yeah.
striking while the iron is hot.
Yes, yes, indeed. And while I said before that's the most
WB.
consistently delivered the franchise, I'm not going to say all the films are great films. I just mean they were done so consistently, and at least there's
Oh,
good parts of everything.
I actually meant like there's almost more good than bad through this whole series.
Oh, I agree. There's more good than bad. I mean, there are a few that are, but we'll get there. We'll get there. This is not one of them.
Really,
this is
no.
Whew.
Well, I mean that. Look, I don't think had this movie not been good, we wouldn't be doing a series.
That's true.
Talk.
That's very true.
But you know, here we're going to set the table a little bit, and this is kind of interesting. It's kind of fun because when The Conjuring was being done, James Wan wasn't a huge filmmaker at that time.
Right.
Like he was one that people kind of might have recognized his name if you had seen Death Sentence or if you had seen Dead Silence or Saw. Saw, arguably to that time, was the biggest movie he had ever done.
Right.
It was a movie he had done outside of the studio. Right. And well, I'd say The Conjuring at this point is the biggest. Saw has had the bigger impact, maybe.
That's kind of what I mean. Yeah, as far as like if you think of one movie, you think of one movie is probably Saw a little bit more as far as in the zeitgeist overall.
But the argument could be made that The Conjuring. Actually, I wonder. Could you look while we're talking about this? Check in the box office. See what the Saw overall box office versus The Conjuring overall box office is.
Like because the movies or the franchises.
The franchises. Because if we look at the overall,
right.
Because I mean, even the first Conjuring alone made $319 million.
Yeah, I think the first Saw only made $100 million.
Right. So here's where I'm going with all this. While you do the heavy lifting, I'm going to set the table. 2013 rolls around, and James Wan is coming out with this brand new, brand spanking awesome horror film called The Conjuring, based on the true tellings, if you will, of the Warrens.
Yep.
They were 2 paranormal investigators who were pretty renowned in circles because of the Amityville horror. That's the thing that they were most known for, was the hauntings in Amityville. So he decides to make this movie around them. It's a low budget movie for a studio at the time. It's about $20 million. And this is looked at as like a potential maybe they could do more. But, you know, it's going to be a one-off for now. We're not really exploring doing it until we know how it's going to go. But they start to test the movie. They start to market the movie, and they're realizing that this is a much bigger movie than they're anticipating.
Right.
This movie gets slapped with a July 19th summer release.
Wow.
Right in the middle of the summer, which is huge. This is a thing that doesn't happen. Yeah, like it doesn't happen very frequently with horror movies where you're putting it out right in the middle of the summer as a big tentpole movie. Like WB was positioning this as a tentpole.
Which is amazing.
An R-rated. Yeah, it's amazing. So this is a, $20 million film being marketed as like a $50, $60 million tentpole, $100 million tentpole even.
Right.
But what's interesting is not only does this movie end up being jockeyed as this big blockbuster, the way that they're marketing it, that with its release date, this movie is also doing like cons. They're taking it to WonderCon. They're taking it like they're shopping this movie at the same time that they're doing like Edge of Tomorrow. They're doing these bigger, like it's being jockeyed with Pacific Rim. Like it's a weird, awesome time to be alive because these movies that The Conjuring really doesn't have anything to do with is kind of being marketed with them. WB is taking this with them to the same conventions that they're taking things like Pacific Rim and Edge of Tomorrow. And that's amazing for this little movie like this. I was in Anaheim at WonderCon when they brought this movie, and James Wan came out not with his cast, but he brought the actual kids who are now adults to talk about their experiences, and they showed some footage and they talked about him coming in and trying to recreate this, and it was super cool and it was super fun and it was really exciting, and it made me just so excited to be like, wow, WB's really jockeying this as a big movie. And not only did they jockey it, I was gonna say, and it worked. That's the thing. And I'm gonna throw it to you now a little quickly because I asked you to do something for me.
You did. And I did.
You said that the Saw franchise was the bigger franchise
I was
and may have
wrong.
had a bigger impact.
I was
You were
wrong. I was dead wrong.
Dead wrong?
Dead wrong. As in, like, I got, like, Jigsaw came and just took me out. We got
That's
a
unfortunate.
$2 billion Conjuring franchise, $2,106,771,064 versus $477,999,086.
That's so
$1.5 billion dollars more.
That is fascinating to me because I actually thought for how popular the Saw movies were, especially in like the beginning,
Right.
I actually thought that it would have made more.
I
I thought
would've
this
too.
had at least crossed over 500 million.
Yeah. I think it was going to be a lot closer. But I mean, that just goes to show you because Saw was never touted as anything more than a horror. It was a successful horror franchise and definitely had word of mouth. But this was like a crossover hit, like a big tentpole type movie, like you're talking about.
This movie was made for $20 million and made $319.5 million worldwide.
That's amazing.
Just the first one.
Yeah, this is just the first
That's
one.
unknown. Or
And
not also, just unknown.
What's also funny about that to me, success. I think part of the success was how scary it was to a degree because it's rated R, and they delivered the film to the MPAA, and they gave it a rating of R, and then said they're talking about like what would it take to go down to PG-13. I don't know if they ever really wanted to, but just like out of curiosity's sake, the MPAA said there's nothing that you could really take out to bring it down to a PG-13 because it's too scary. That's why they made it an R. It's just too damn scary.
I remember when that started to go around, I think before the movie had come out, and that started to build this like unreal sort of hype around it.
Right.
And do you remember that first trailer that with the clapping and just like the way that it made people feel? And I think that between that and then hearing this stuff from about the MPAA and the rating, and that it was literally rated R just off of its scariness, like just off of the atmosphere of the movie.
Yeah.
That to me was like, holy shit, what is this movie?
Right, exactly. And what this movie is, I'll say right now, it's a perfectly crafted, slightly retro, slow burn of a horror flick.
100%. I mean, this is a throwback movie, man. Like everything about this. I mean, it helps. Again, it's based on true events, with the quotations and stuff.
Right.
But it's 1971. So alone in that, you're getting this throwback to a bygone era with just the year alone. But by doing that, Juan builds out to be like, I'm not just going back in time. I'm going to make a movie that's reminiscent of making an older horror film, something a little more like Poltergeist, something a little bit more like the Amityville Horror, where it's going to be a slow burn. I'm really going to push this. Like, I'm not going to come out the gate and scare you. We're going to really build through it. Like, it's got a brilliant cold open, very Indiana Jones-like, actually.
Yeah, I'll get that.
With them on a case for Annabelle.
Yep.
Which is brilliant, and the way that it plays into the movie later is also brilliant, and the way it plays into the franchise later is also brilliant. All these things are true.
Yep.
So the great thing about this was they really made this movie that felt like, I think I said it in my old Letterboxd review, but I was like, the thing that it was really great is that it made a movie that cared about horror. Like, we talk about it a lot on here, that there's talk that like slasher films are really schlocky. It's accurate. Right. It doesn't change the fact that I really enjoy them.
100%.
But then there's all this talk about like elevated horror, things like, The Babadook or Midsommar and things like that. But I think that there's still this disconnect between the audience and the genre, that you need horror to be these elevated horror type things. And I think Juan went out of his way to be like, you don't have to be elevated horror. You just have to have a story worth telling that makes the audience feel scared.
Right.
And I think that that's what was so great about this movie, is that he didn't go out of his way to be like, well, we're this like great, large, elevated horror film. That wasn't that. It was that you were making a movie that was just really terrifying, that audience reacted to because they liked the characters. They liked what you were doing. And there's something as thrilling about a great horror film like this that really builds scares, in the same way as watching a great action film with incredible action sequences.
Right. I will say, basing it off the true stories, or like I said, the true stories of Ed and Lorraine Warren's files, or whatever. And I'll put this out here right now. Actually, I want to touch base on something. You know, the Warrens are people who are self-professed demonologists. They've been self-professed, like, you know, exorcism involved with that kind of thing, paranormal activity, paranormal researchers, etc. They have their skeptics. A lot of people have said that they are not nice. Some people have said, you come out and said they're not nice people. They said actually they're trashy, they're frauds, or whatever. I don't know.
I've heard it all.
I'm not here to judge that, though. I'm here to judge the Warrens of this franchise, the Warrens that are presented in this story. And I can separate the real life Warrens from the Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga Warrens. The Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga Warrens come across very well, and it's effective to the story and necessary to the story. Because if you don't fall in with them, you're not going to fall in with the overall story. And I fall in with them. They are a great couple. They have great chemistry. I believe they're genuine in their feelings, and I just think that they were perfectly cast and they work really well together.
I could not agree with you more. I think this entire franchise has hinged on buying into them and their relationship and their characters and who they are and what they stand for. And I think that they've done such a great job at building this franchise around the Warrens in such a particular way. Like, sure, don't get me wrong, the spinoffs have clearly focused on like the Nun and Annabelle, but at the same time, even the Annabelle films at this point have come around on the Warrens in some capacity.
Right.
I mean, they went as far as having Taissa Farmiga in the lead of the Nun.
Right.
Because there's the familial aspect of it. Like, it's very clear that they're aware what makes this franchise popular.
Right.
And so that goes to show in such a cool way that as iconic as Annabelle is now and has been for a decade, still can't believe I'm saying that. I think that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are as iconic.
I agree.
For playing the Warrens. And that's a very interesting thing because I can't name a lot of iconic horror characters who are not like Michael.
Right.
And Jason.
Right.
You know, obviously we've got Laurie. Obviously we've got Sydney Prescott.
Yep.
Nancy. But when you think about it, like, there's not a lot of characters that continue to like be big presence like this in a horror franchise that are not the main entity.
Right. What's funny
I think that's very, very cool.
What's also funny about that, I agree, it's very cool, is that it's like they are it's a synergistic thing. They're so much better together than separate. Like Patrick Wilson's Ed or Vera's Lorraine, like separately, don't have the same energy.
No.
Together, it's magical. If that makes sense.
It totally does. And it's actually, you bring that up and we'll get to it when we get to the movie, but like the third Conjuring, it actually only really works because of them. Yes. Like that movie stays afloat because of them.
And because we were
in that with them. And that just goes to show how great they are and how well this was cast. And that's the funny thing too, is like, think about it. This is 2013. Patrick Wilson, he's been in things, right? Yeah. For about a decade. We've seen him in things like Phantom of the Opera. We've seen him in The Alamo. We've seen him in The A-Team. He's been in tons of things. Vera Farmiga, same thing. She's been in like The Departed, Up in the Air. She's done plenty of stuff. Neither of them were like leading man, leading lady types. They probably should have been. They have the typical Hollywood look. They have that typical Hollywood A-lister feel, but they never really got there.
Right.
Until like this really put them on the map in a leading capacity because Juan gambled on them. He didn't put just any actors in these roles. He very clearly did his diligence on who he was going to cast, how he was going to cast it, and put them at the focal point of the film.
100%. And it's a smart decision also, going back to my original point of this. I like having the Warren files as basis. You can have those cold opens about other cases. I mean, I suppose he worked on 10,000 cases or something like that. But you have all these cases you can just draw from, not only for movies, but for sidebars for movies, for like things. This is the greatest way to introduce the Warrens. You get to see them working. You get to see them on the case and everything else, and that's where you already know where we are when we gonna and when we have to need them later. When the family needs them later on, we got them. We've seen them in action, and it's a great opening for that reason.
It's such an incredible opening. We opened in 1971.
No, 68 actually, 1968 for the.
Oh yeah, 68. I'm sorry. Yeah, the cold opens 68, and they're in this apartment. You're hearing this story play out about the Annabelle doll and these college kids or young 20-somethings who have let this doll into the house, and they let the demon in.
Yeah,
they didn't mean to, but they did, and now here it is.
Here it is. Here we are. It's really well done.
It's a great cold open.
Yeah,
it's a great cold open, dude. It scares the shit out of me still.
Yeah, I agree. It's done very creepily, and yet your respect for the Warrens are there so much that you believe and you cling on to them and go, okay, I'm going to follow you guys and you're going to get me through this. Just like the kids, to be honest.
Yeah.
The nurses. So then we move over into the 1971. That's where we're in 1971, where we meet the parent family. And I always say right away, we talked about before about this being the 70s, it's just wonderfully shot. The colors, the tones, the I don't know, the texture
of it. It oozes 70s.
It does ooze 70s. Exactly. I feel like it's genuinely, I feel like I'm watching a movie made in the 70s. The only hint that it's not is how crisp and clear the screen is. I always feel like I always feel it in a way I'd be watching like with lines crossed because it's an old VHS tape, because it just feels genuine, and that's great.
I think that's a major compliment, and maybe the most major you can give is like any period piece can feel like a movie that you're watching, but like it doesn't always get it. Like I love American Gangster. Have you seen American Gangster?
I have. It's been a while, but I had to see it.
It's set roughly around the same time. I think I want to say like the 70s or so.
Right.
It's a movie with Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, directed by Ridley Scott. If you guys have never seen it, it's really, really great. It's actually one of my favorite gangster films. But what's interesting is that like that movie still feels modern.
Yeah.
It's shot to be in the 70s. It's written to be the 70s. It's dressed to be the 70s. But it doesn't necessarily feel like the 70s.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so what you're talking about is really interesting, because I definitely feel like this movie feels like the 70s. It feels like a warm blanket. I feel like these people are sitting around in their bell-bottom jeans, listening to vinyl records and just having a good time, man. Like that's what it feels like. And that really is a shout out to the fact that to Juan, talking. It's really a big thing that Juan and his team could do that for $20 million.
Yeah, exactly. They took their budget and they used whatever they did with it. They used it really smart, and they created it's a great production design. So it's perfect in there. Secondly, we get the family together, and the family's a great family. Ron Livingston and Lily Taylor, like I said, they play great 70s parents. The kids are all very great 70s kids, and it feels like a genuine family together. I feel like I've known these kids. I've known this family. I've seen this family in action. They're playing like hide and clap and everything else, this whole thing, which of course is the first thing they do. And I love how Juan uses things in rhythm, in multiples. You get them the hide and clap here. You're going to get the hide and clap later on, which becomes more sinister. And things like that comes in a little bit more sinister. Every time it kind of like repeats things. And when they repeat, it's just a little bit worse along the way. It's so well laid out. And again, it's such a slow burn. You expect things to happen a lot sooner than it does. But instead, you get them in drips and drabs. When you get them, you get them.
That's the brilliance of this movie. I mean, I brought it up. You just said it. I had said it up top. The slow burn of this movie is what's so great. And one of the things I like too is that when they move in, one of the things we get right away too is like the famous James Wan Warner shots. Where the camera is just like sweeping through the house, and you're getting to know the family a little bit, because it kind of focuses on each one of the family members in a separate way. And they've moved out to Rhode Island. What I think they were in Jersey, I think they said originally.
Yes. Yep, that's what you said.
And so, this idea that the family's moving out there, probably because number one, they're a family of 5 or they're a family of 7. They've got 5 daughters. So it's this big family. They're moving out there. They've got this big house now. They probably got it for not a lot, probably better for them budget wise, maybe even job wise. And so they're moving to Rhode Island and they're just hoping to have a new life, but the dog won't go inside.
Right. Which is...
And the moment the dog won't go inside, Sadie is your guys' hero.
Right.
If the dog won't go inside, just leave.
Just leave. Exactly.
Just leave.
Listen to the goddamn dog.
Yeah. Just leave. The dog is right.
Yeah. Dogs are always right. Dogs are always right in horror movies. They're the ones you got to listen to. If they're telling you not to go in, then you don't go in.
Correct. And yet, for some reason, Sadie won't go inside. And what do? Well, we're just going to go there anyway.
We're all right. We'll be fine. We'll leave him outside of the chain. We'll be okay. But he's not.
Just bothers me.
It does too.
It just bothers me. Because I have 2 dogs, and anytime my dogs even start to bark wrong, I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Yep, I get that too.
I just feel uncomfortable. Anyway.
It's a sad time. Perhaps
Sadie,
they shouldn't have drawn when they do discover the dead dog. Unfortunately, when Sadie comes around, she discovers the kids the next day, dead. It's a horrible sign, but maybe I just think at that point it did pass through my mind. Maybe they shouldn't have called the Warrens. Maybe they should have called John Wick at that point, and then this whole thing wrapped up easier. John Wick. I actually want to see that movie now. John Wick, the paranormal investigator. I think that'd be great.
I think that's a movie we need. I think that we can make that happen.
I agree.
Because, we also know that the director of the John Wick franchise is going to be dealing with Immortal Scotsman soon. So, anything is possible.
That is very, very true.
Very excited about the Highlander reboot. Yes, I finally got to bring up Highlander. I'm so happy. So, the other thing about all this is that who sold them the house?
Good question.
That didn't look far into this enough to know that there's this basement that has been boarded up that no one is talking about.
That's a great question. We never know. We never found out.
What realtor out there was like, you know what, we're going to sell this house, but we're not going to even look into the past. Like, this thing has a fucking basement.
Yes.
A creepy fucking basement in the fucking middle of nowhere, Rhode Island. And we're just going to let anyone fucking move in with no problem. Like, no one has to know that there's a creepy fucking basement here. Don't worry about the fact that this family has 5 kids and one of these kids is going to find the creepy fucking basement. What were they thinking?
We're going to board it up. We're not going to see anything. We're going to get paid. That's what they were thinking. It's a murder house. That's what they're thinking. But I got to say,
it's 100% a murder house.
It is. The funniest part about the whole thing to me was they find the basement, get downstairs, come up, and Lily Tyler goes, I wonder why they boarded it up. It's a sign. It's a sign. It's just going down.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah. It reminded of like the Eddie Murphy stand-up bit from the 80s. He's like,
yeah.
They tell you, get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. That's pretty much what it is.
That is what this is saying. So they find the creepy fucking basement, and that's how I'm going to refer to this the entire time, is either the creepy fucking basement. I have said that word more times in one podcast than the entire of the shows we've done. And between that and or the murder basement. Those are going to be the two things I swing between, because both are true.
Right.
Both are true. So they go down into the fucking murder basement because someone has decided, and their thought is, why would anyone leave all this stuff behind? Bad sign.
That's another red flag.
Sign. Get out. Like, what are you doing? You people, leave the house. Of course, I have to give it to Ron Livingston's Roger, who's like, look, there could be something down here. We could make some money.
Yeah,
like, he's thinking.
That's true.
He's thinking, but he's not thinking enough, because he really should be thinking, what are we doing? Get out. They
can't get out because all their money's tied up in this place. That's what it is.
And also, not just all the money's tied up in this place. If they leave now, the movie's over.
That's exactly true. That's actually more true, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So we get another, I got to say, the other part is, again, using that rhythmic feel. We get the first foot grabbing scene where I can't remember the name of the kid. No, it's not Nancy. Or not Nancy. April. I can't. The kid's names all flow together. What was that kid's?
It's Christine. Christine is the one played by Joey King, who gets pulled on.
Right. Okay.
She thinks that Nancy is the one who's doing it.
That's what it was. And the first time through, it ends up being pretty innocent-ish. Like there's some pulling going on, and things, but you don't see anything, and it's just kind of like forgotten. Again, later on, we get to revisit that in a much darker, twisted way, and it works out that way. Again, I love the fact we get the tease and then the hammer.
Well, and the other thing with this is, like, right before that happens, like, we get the next morning of their first night in. They find the basement, and they realize that all the clocks have stopped at 3:07. They realize that this bird has flown into the window and died. Then they find Sadie, and she's dead.
Right.
Then Carolyn's looking at her arm, and she's bruised.
Right.
That, like, all these little weird things start to happen, and it's happening a lot. Like, it's starting to speed up, and it's starting to get weird, and that's when Christine gets the first encounter of someone pulling on her foot.
Right.
And then they start to hear things.
Yes.
And this is, again, to your point, there was this build. One of the things that we see with the family is that they play this hide and seek game where they blindfold one of the kids and they clap. And I think it's a total of 3 times.
Yes.
And you're supposed to, like, basically walk through the house blindfolded, finding the person if you can from the way that they clap.
It's basically Marco Polo as a hide and seek game.
Right. And so they've been playing this game. They've been doing it clearly their whole lives.
Right.
And so we see them playing it, and now we get to this sequence, and this is Juan is so brilliant at what he does, but it's the creepy clapping in the hallway.
Yes.
Which leads to Carolyn getting locked in the basement.
Yes.
The fucking murder basement.
Let me say real quick about it, the clap thing. That's one of the things that works the whole film from Juan. The usage of sound is just top notch. When to give you some sound, when not to give you some sound. But also between this and even the voices, there's none of this like over the top demonic sound voice setting. A lot of it's like normal clapping, but yet that's creepy too. They actually have talks later on when we get to hear the ghosts in the basement and stuff. They don't speak like this. I mean, a little bit when Carolyn's really messed up, but it doesn't. It's a normal speaking, and in a way, it was more disconcerting because like they're right there and they're like in that realm with you. They're not in the spiritual realm. They're right there with you, talking your language in your face. But I loved how they did that.
I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's one of the things that you totally nailed that makes this movie so scary, and I think continues to be so scary, is that part of the grounding of this reality in this idea that the paranormal and stuff exists, but this idea that what if you break down the walls, and it's really not what we think. Like, we all watched movies and stuff where everything's kind of that this evil voice, things like that, or even the way that demons look.
Right.
This movie really doesn't dive into that. Instead, it goes by this idea that everything is kind of real. The images look real. Nothing looks terrifyingly demon-like or sounds real demon-like until towards the end. Like, everything feels like creepy, like there's some sort of rift in time. Like, there's a great moment where the cop it's back in the third act. We haven't gotten there, but this cop encounters a nurse from the past who is a ghost who like attacks towards him, and it just looks like an undead person. Right. And it's just so creepy and just sound like, oh, dude, it gets under my skin.
Yeah, me too.
And that's this whole movie. This whole movie makes me feel that way because Juan's brilliance is in making us feel like this could happen in any place. Like, this is anywhere USA, right?
Anytime, anytime, any place, anywhere. And that's what's cool about it. That's very much a case of it. We do get more as it builds on. We get these again. It's a slow burn of things. We get Cindy. God, I always get again the names. Somebody's sleepwalking. Because the sleepwalker
I believe
are
Cindy
bad.
is the sleepwalker.
Cindy's a sleepwalker, correct? I'm very bad with names. I gotta admit, I know the actors, but I know characters, especially when there's a bunch
Guys,
of
he
kids
doesn't
involved.
know my name half of the time.
That's
and
true.
my name is in his phone, and we have been friends for at least 5 years.
That's true. Who are you again? Why are we here?
Exactly.
All right, I'm getting old.
And this is, of course, you're not a day over 22.
That's true.
But
Mentally.
Cindy Perrin is played by Mackenzie Foy, who
Right.
many fans will recognize from the Twilight saga. She played
Yes.
Resamine, I believe, the daughter of Kristen Stewart and Rob Pattinson, the once and future Batman. So, they got some really good young talent in this too. Because,
Yes.
like I said, Joey King is also in this as Christine. She's been a good young talent for a little while.
Yeah.
Just lots of cool people, man.
A lot of cool people. And so, yeah, like that sequence is very nice too. That bang they had against the armed war, which obviously comes into play very heavily. Something that they left behind the previous owners. And I guess I could see using that if I came to a house and that was there, I'd probably still use it because it is kind of cool. Although after the murder basement, that might make me think twice. For sure.
Look, the moment I find a murder basement, I'm not sure I'm staying, but
Exactly.
maybe I'm getting a priest or someone to come through and smudge the house or something.
Very true. Very true.
I don't know.
So this all starts going down, and we get the feet grabbing, the part two feet grabbing this point, and there's some great camera trickery in there. I gotta say, I love the shot when Nancy I can't see the names. Christine starts looking around, realizes it's not Nancy, looks under the bed, and then she goes up to look at the corner, and the camera tilts with her, almost like you're her.
Mhm.
And it just is so creepy and eerie. And you watch from afar, and man, is it creepy. I don't know how they could make it any more creepy than they did. But then when Nancy goes to look and then the door slams, oh my God, I'm jumping out of my seat.
Everything about Christine in this, in the way that it plays out, is just scary.
Yeah.
And I think that's a credit to Joey King, who, again, I think she's very talented. I've always liked Joey King. Don't like all the movies she might be in, but I think she's very talented.
Right.
And her in particular, this whole scene, because the whole thing is she keeps telling her sister, Nancy, to go to bed. Nancy, go to bed. Or leave me alone. Quit grabbing my feet.
Right.
This whole thing. And I think the thing that scares me the most is that it's that look when she looks up and she starts to see the thing behind the door.
Yes.
And she's like, Nancy, do you see it? There's someone behind the door. And Nancy's like, there's no one here. And she goes, no, there's someone there. Right. And I think that there's something really scary because the way that they light the scene and the way that the camera sits and the way that it all kind of plays, I think your mind even tricks you a little bit to think that someone is there.
Yes.
There's nothing there. It's just pure black. But I always look. It doesn't. Yeah. Every time I've watched it, I'm always looking to see if I can see something, and they do such a great job.
So funny you mentioned that because honestly, in my notes here, I wrote down 32:21, and that's the timestamp of what it is. Because I kind of wanted to go back and watch on my computer.
Yeah.
I watched it during the daytime. I wanted to try to make sure it was. I wanted to go back. I didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance, unfortunately. But that's exactly what you mean. I want to see something. Because the audience want to see something at this point. You're waiting for it to happen, and then it does it the way
you want to see what's there.
Right. Exactly. So good.
And Juan is so good at that because he's building the tension. And again, Joey King is selling this scene.
Right.
Her acting of being so terrified by the thing that's back behind the door, this whole idea that something is there and we can't see it, is so fucking creepy.
Yes.
And yet I can't help but buy into it and feel it. And when the door slams shut, dear God.
Wow.
It's the scariest thing. You hear them screaming. The parents come running up. That's when they realize that things are clearly wrong. This, as it is, Lily Taylor, who plays Carolyn, she's already been locked in the basement. She had the hand clap sequence, which we really kind of just glossed over.
It did.
But that whole sequence is so terrifying. One of the brilliant things about that is the use of the matches and her trying to like light them so she can see what's going on, and the hands coming out behind her and the clapping is just so fucking scary.
God, so scary. Especially after,
because he just builds it.
Yeah, we glossed over the other part too of the April and her friend Rory, and so we hear Rory, the children's voice, and that's who's playing hide and clap with her part two. And that's when you get the clap, it's Rory speaking, and Rory being, let's play, and then you get the clap. It's like, oh my God. I gotta say, it's really funny. It's now because we're about 45 or 46 minutes in to this podcast, and that's how long it takes before the Warrens and the parents actually start interacting. That's a long time in a horror movie. Really, if you think about it.
It is. Well, and I mean, the Warrens, we kind of meet up with them here and there throughout this sequence. Like, it's funny because anytime we're doing this, and this is just me, like, kind of a peek behind the scenes, I always have the wiki page open so I can look at, like, the actors and stuff, so I can keep stuff a little more straight when we're talking. And you wouldn't really realize, looking at it, how much the Warrens are actually in the movie, because they really don't talk about the fact that we spend a lot of time with them a little bit kind of throughout, where once they've done the Annabelle, they talk about the Annabelle stuff at the college, and then we spend some time with them privately.
Right.
A little bit of stuff at the house. They take the doll back. They're talking to the priest. That's when we meet Judy for the first time, because she's hanging around inside. And he's like, you can't be in here. You never go in here.
Right.
Which, of course, one of the other movies deals with. We learn why she cannot be in there.
Right.
But it's just so interesting how long the characters are separated. And it reminds me that we spend so much time these days, I feel like, with a lot of movies and television, it feels this need to speed things up so that these characters meet really quickly. And I think that build is so much better. Because you get to know the things that are happening and the people that are involved, and it kind of hits different.
And you're like, finally, these guys are here to help now. Finally, they're here to help.
Right. And I'm going to say this now, right? This is a spoiler alert for Spider-Man No Way Home, but there's a very similar feel for me in that we don't get the other Spider-Men in that movie until like the last hour.
Right.
It takes a long time for us to get with them. Granted, we don't see them in the movie any other time until the time that they pop in.
Right.
But we all kind of knew. And so we were all kind of waiting for it. Mm-hmm. But it made it feel different once it happened, because you went through so many emotions to get there.
Yes.
And so then you finally get that thing, and it's super exciting and it's super great. And that's kind of how this feels. Because like you said, this is them kind of coming to save the day. Carolyn goes to sit in to listen to them at another college seminar, and she kind of confronts them out front and says, my family's been going through a lot. We just moved into this house, and something's attacking us.
Right. Before that,
just straight up, like,
the best part about it, we get those little moments we do get with the Warrens before they meet. It's all about laying the groundwork about this issue that Lorraine had. And that's why Ed's scared of bring. Ed doesn't want to bring her along. She's scared, but ultimately she wants to work with her husband, and that they want to continue with their good work. And that's why he I think initially turns down Carolyn, but then obviously when Vera Farmiga's Lorraine hears it, and then she's like, "I gotta help. We gotta help." And it turns into this.
There's kids involved.
Because there's kids involved.
The kids being involved is the big thing. Is that for her because of Judy,
right?
And she, it's this idea of what would happen if this was Judy. Like, would we sit by? And then Ed not really want to get involved because of what had happened to Lorraine in the past, because something had happened during an exorcism that potentially went wrong,
right?
And these kind of things all play into it. And so I love that there's this feeling of real care and real compassion between the two. And like, really, we don't want to put each other in harm's way, but also you need to kind of do this.
Right.
And I've really, really loved the build of this. And I think that there's this great line when he's already turned it down and they're kind of talking about it. And Lorraine goes, "What was the thing that you said to me on our wedding night?" And he kind of jokes and he's like, "Can we do it again?"
Can you do it again? Yeah.
And she was like, "After that." And it was that God had put us together for a reason.
Right. Exactly.
And what if this is this reason? And that kind of continues to play through the entire movie, is this idea that, I mean, obviously, again, this was written as a one-off with the potential to do more, but it was always just seen as one movie.
Right.
But the idea being that the one reason that they were put together, according to this movie, is to help this family.
Right. And that's what makes it important.
But I kind of love that in a way, because it really builds this foundation of they're not doing this just because. They're doing this because they care about this family. They don't want to see anything happen to this family.
Right.
And I think that's really beautiful and really, like, you have no place to have to help someone.
Right.
None of us do, right? Theoretically, none of us have to help anyone. We could all just not do that. We could all be selfish. We could all just be assholes and never do anything. But these people who are a little bit more connected to this, like, other world, this idea that they could help people through situations like this, and they could have blown this off.
Right.
But they don't, is pretty great for me, for a character standpoint.
I agree. So they have gone now to the parent house. We get to see the Warrens, who were a little bit. Actually, I should bring it back real quick and say we did see it one time earlier in the film during some of our mini visits with the Warrens. They found that one house that they did an investigation of, and it wasn't anything haunted. Like they said, you see them saying, "Yeah, it's just pipes." Yeah. Usually that's what it is. So the Warrens come into this house, and you kind of feel like, okay, so the Warrens come into these things, and they're skeptical like everybody else is until they see what's real, what's not. And it's very quick. They obviously, you could see on Lorraine's face, they're very quick to see that, okay, this is something legit here. They witness some stuff, and soon enough, they're ready to move in and help. And we get to meet the crew, the rest of the crew. Officer Brad. Now, why do we have a cop here? I have to look into like exorcisms or stuff like this. Was this like a commonplace thing? You had to have an officer of the law there? Because like Drew says, like Drew, who, by the way, Drew, super cool. She's one of the coolest cats I've ever seen. Like low key, not like a famous character, not a famous actor, nothing. But yet I want to be like Drew. She's like hero in all sense of the word.
Yeah, Drew is a great character. You're right though about the Brad character. Really not. I don't know, man. Like, here's the thing. I don't know if that was them thing, but it doesn't seem like he's really been on anything like this before, so it must be something else. But I've never really understood it. I maybe it was just. I'd have to look to find out if Brad Hamilton was a real person.
Yeah, I'd have to look to
because
that.
It also could be everyone is clearly buying into everything that's going on.
Right.
Within the confines of the movie. So he could have been created as a character. Again, I don't know if he's real. I'd have to look.
Right.
But he could have been used and created to be a surrogate for anyone who didn't believe this stuff was real.
I was going to say that actually. And I think my whole feeling about the whole thing was that he was brought in to be the skeptic that Drew could kind of poke at and chide at about, oh, it's a draft, huh? I don't get scared like that at a draft. That kind of thing. Like he does it multiple times over and over again. It's interesting though. It's just kind of a weird. I guess it only bothers me, and I guess I shouldn't say it bothers me because it doesn't really bother me. But like the fact that this is based on real events is that kind of thing. I was like, I started thinking like, is an exorcisms and things like that. Do they do that? Do they bring sheriffs over for it? What's the guy going to do with the gun? Like it doesn't. I don't know. I don't know. Did throw me up for a little bit, but that's okay. Not a big deal.
I'm literally looking into it right now, and I can't find anything that really says if he was real or not.
Okay. So it's kind of a weird choice. I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit of a weird choice.
Again, I get it, though. You should always have the skeptic, right?
Right.
There should always be a skeptic. As far as movies and entertainment are concerned, like a skeptic should always exist within the confines of the things that you're doing.
Right.
So for me, his existence makes sense.
Yeah. It does when it comes down to it. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm not like that concerned about it. And actually, he's a good character for it. He's entertaining, gives us a few moments of levity that's needed here and there. And it's always nice to see the skeptic get turned, and that's always what you see in these films. Good horror film, you get to see that usually, so that's a good choice.
Look, I think that his dynamic too with Drew is really great. I think that it just works. It just works. He's a good character, and I'm glad he's here because there is a little bit of levity that's needed throughout the rest of the film, because this is where the movie really starts to pick up and becomes very, very heavy very quickly. And I think that him and Drew's relationship offer a lot of chemistry and potential for comedy in a way that none of the other characters can really give us.
Right. I agree. And I want to touch base on something you just said, how like we just start to go a little faster. This is a really well-paced film. And because of it, and a lot of people will say sometimes it's too slow in the beginning, but the slow burn, it doesn't, I don't mind a slow burn, and I don't mind a fast-paced film either. What I mind usually is the choppiness, when it's like slow and then fast and slow and then fast. This builds throughout the whole film. It's slow, but it gets faster and faster and faster, and it's going breaking. It's amping. It amps up with your emotions, and to the point at the end, it does go very fast. It's very fast paced at the end. Like at one point, I remember like being surprised, like they did this whole thing, and we'll get back to it. Like the moment where the Warrens are home, and Ron Livingston shows up at the motel, and also like the daughter, like, oh, mom left with the kids, the two young ones, whatever. And I was like, oh my god, that's now already. We're almost towards the end. What just happened? Like I didn't realize how quickly it was moving along, and it did. But that's what a successful pace does. It kind of builds and takes you along with the ride, so you don't even notice when it's becoming fast paced.
Yeah, I think that the best thing I can say about almost every movie I've ever seen by Juan is that he is very, very aware of pacing and issues with pacing. Because I want to say to date, his longest movie is probably Aquaman. And even that movie is very well, like almost too well paced. That movie moves quick.
Right.
And I know that there's a lot of people who are like, it's really long. It is, but it moves at a fucking like fire pace.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that this movie has a very similar feel of it's a slow burn, but it's a pretty cracking slow burn, to be honest with you. Like they leave you wanting and needing more, and the movie's gears are always going. Like everything feels like it has a place. None of it feels like it's just there to be there.
Right.
And that's very important to a movie like this. So I really appreciate that he could make this movie work as well as it does. And it's funny because the Conjuring 2 is like 30 minutes longer than this one.
Right. I think it actually
this
suffers a
movie
little
is
bit
less
for
than
it.
2 hours.
Yeah, this is like about $1.51. And I do think it does, which still, $1.51 is actually still longer than your usual horror film. Usually horror films are kind of quick. They're usually must be like 90 minutes in and out kind of thing.
Right.
$1.51 is very concise, still lets the slow burn. I do think The Conjuring 2, which we'll get to, does suffer a little bit from the bloating a little bit. But we will get there, definitely. So we are at the house, and one of my favorite scenes in the film comes up, and this is the scene where the Warrens are outside in the backyard, and we get the wind blowing, and the wind. First of all, we see the witch hanging from the branch, or at least she does, and she's freaked out. But even better later on is a great shot sequence, a great setup. Lorraine's working, the weather starts getting a little funky, and the wind blows the blank or the sheet onto some kind of presence and away. And you look upstairs, you see somebody upstairs. You see the vision of the witch or whatever upstairs. And that leads into where the witch possesses Carolyn by basically vomiting into her mouth in a possible maybe dream sequence, but more likely real. And everybody starts freaking out. But it's really interesting to see how they react when Carolyn comes out. It's like, nope, I'm all good, no worries about it. Like they didn't really, I don't know if they had any suspicions that it happened then. It almost feels like the demon got away with it pretty easily comparatively.
Yeah.
But again, Great performance by Carolyn, or by Lily Taylor. It's Carolyn. Great performance.
One of the things that you just brought up too, which I was always loved, we really get a lot of time with Lorraine, kind of exploring the house, and you kind of touched on it, right?
Right.
She's going through and seeing things. It's only stuff she can see, and I think that's always been one of the things that's fascinated me the most about the way that this series is done. And we'll even talk about it more with the second one, is that Lorraine having this connection to whatever it is that she has, and being like, I'm trying to figure out the right word for it, but she's basically walking between two worlds.
Right.
And I've always found that really kind of cool, because it's always given some very visually interesting things. That shot of her seeing the legs in the witch hanging in the tree behind her husband is so fucking eerie.
It's so eerie.
And it's so, like, those are the things that they do really, really well in this. And there's just this build of tension in that she's kind of the only one who really sees what's happening.
Yeah. And Ed trusts her implicitly, so he knows to listen to her or when to tune into what she's trying to tune in, to try to tune into what she's tuning into. He can't. He's not clairvoyant, but he does respect her enough and see her that he's there. But it is all really based on her shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, we get to learn a little more about the background. This is where Brandon sees the maid and gets attacked. We talked about that a little bit. This is the cool part where they find behind the armoire, they find this little hidden space, this crawl space that Lorraine crawls into and get more attached to the basement. And she falls through to the basement floor, losing her necklace during this sequence in a way, which is definitely comes into play later on. I did love this. Again, it's Lorraine using her skills to really figure out what's going on. It's a great little sequence. It's a scary sequence because the demon gets more heavily involved at this point, and you feel for Ed Warren, like searching desperately for Lorraine at this point. I don't know. This is one of my favorite sequences of the film. What about you?
I love this sequence. Very similarly, I think that, again, a big part of it for me is their relationship.
Right.
And there's a real sense of terror that Ed is facing in what's kind of happening.
Yeah.
And I've always really loved the kind of creepy going through here. Like, you're in a secret passage, goes through the floorboards, just something about it. It's very claustrophobic.
Yes.
Because I'm a very claustrophobic person.
Me too.
And so for me, I get very scared in confined spaces if I don't kind of know the situation I'm in. Like, it's one thing if I'm in a haunted house and I know that there's like an in and an out, like, because obviously you guys know, and like, I go to Haunt every year. I always go to Universal Horror Nights. Like, that stuff's great, but it can be constricting. This movie gives me that feel of constricting.
Yes.
And being trapped and not knowing where to go. And I think a part of it also is that you're hearing the voices, you're hearing people screaming. There's just so much happening, and all of this is going on. And Bathsheba, which is the voice, or which is
her demon,
the witch,
witch demon,
is attacking one of the children.
Yes.
And so this is all like, there's just this amount of chaos happening of Lorraine is falling through there, she's gone missing, Bathsheba is attacking one of the kids. Like, it becomes very chaotic. And it becomes a nightmare very, very fast. And this is about the moment that the movie just goes,
done.
We're in for
real
this.
Quick. We're all in. We're ready to go. We want to see this, what the outcome is going to be. We do get the great scene there. Then after that, we get a little bit of a break, a little bit of a pause as it goes forward. We do get to get them home, get to see Lorraine visiting their home again, and seeing that her daughter is now being attacked, which is weird because, like, we don't make the connection necessarily right away. But we saw the necklace, so that makes part of it. But I like seeing the daughter getting attacked and get talking about. You see Annabelle in the rocking chair with someone and everything else. That's another great sequence. And when Ed bursts down the door, the rocking chair goes like slamming at them. I like this one too. It's really kind of cool because we just saw stuff happening in one house. Now Ed and Lorraine have to deal with it at their own home, which is something they probably haven't dealt with it nearly as much.
Well, and it's kind of funny that you bring that up because in a way them dealing with stuff in their own home, but I don't want to get too far into it, but like Annabelle Comes Home is very interesting from that regard.
Right. And that's one I haven't seen yet, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to say a lot, but Annabelle Comes Home is basically a midquel.
Okay.
That takes place, I want to say it takes place either right after this movie or right before this movie, theoretically. Okay. It's because it starts right after they have Annabelle and are leaving with Annabelle from the apartment.
Right. Cool.
And so I loved that in what you just said, this idea that, you know, they fight in their own house.
Right.
And we don't really see that very often, or at least they don't, which is very interesting because all of Annabelle Comes Home, again, spoiler alert, you haven't seen it, all of Annabelle Comes Home is in the Warren house.
Nice. Very cool. I do like that idea then.
And it's kind of interesting because now I'm thinking about it, and this is a weird correlation. Annabelle Comes Home is just like they're in it, but they're gone. It is Judy's movie. So This is also now the second time, and this is something I was going to bring up once we watch it, but I can kind of bring it up here because this is a series overview talk. This idea when she goes in there and they're like, you can't be in here. You know that. And she's kind of looking at Annabelle.
Right.
The thing I find so interesting is that in hindsight of watching Annabelle Comes Home, it almost feels like Annabelle's revenge tour against Judy.
Ooh, okay.
Like from what happens in that to the like Bathsheba now being involved in this one, and this like there's a very interesting build for me from one to the other now that didn't necessarily exist before.
Right.
And I find that really interesting. And so that's kind of why I think what you're saying hit in a way, because it's like, you're right. It is interesting seeing them in their own house. And then I'm like, oh, wow. When you think about it, like we got that whole movie about it. And the way that it builds off of, well, the Warrens really aren't involved in that. So now it really is like the only time that we see the Warrens fighting anything in their own house is in that, because Judy's the one fighting everything in this one or in the other one.
Very cool indeed. Very cool.
Sorry for there's a lot there.
No, that's fine. I just wish I always wish I had seen it so I could talk to you more about it, but we will. We'll have a conversation much later on in the podcast.
And real quick, I wanted to bring this up, and now that we're kind of talking about it, one of the things that I was looking for, I hadn't really thought about it in the past, but since we were kind of like, since we're watching through these and we're talking about them, I'm actively looking anytime they go into the room now, where all the stuff is, how much of the stuff that is in Annabelle Comes Home that pops up in these other movies, even in like shots where I didn't even realize they were there, but they are. And I thought that was very interesting as I've kind of like gone back and rewatched these. I'm like, there's just lots of little things that are kind of set that I was like, oh, dude, that's awesome. And it just goes to show they've really gone a long way to try and make sure that these
continuity work out. Right.
Yeah.
You always appreciate that.
Yeah.
So get to the real fast-paced moment begins. They get there. Carolyn brings the kids back to the house to kill them, and everybody comes on board. And it's a great final act, a great final sequence in the whole film, and then building towards this for a couple different reasons. First of all, the fear factor is up. Lily Taylor gives a unbelievably good performance as the possessed woman. They don't use a whole lot of special effects, which I love. Is not a whole lot of CG or anything like that. There's like some things they do to her face, like the eyes change, obviously, everything else, but a lot of it's done through just acting. A lot of it's done through just performance and maybe some lighting and stuff that makes you really scared. But I got to be honest, I'm scared. I was scared of Bathsheba in Carolyn, because she's terrifying in this part. Yeah. You feel bad because like they can't really finish everything, and she's just going and going and going. I don't know what you thought. What were your thoughts about this ending sequence?
I love this sequence, and real quick, I just loved. I guess actually, I never realized Annabelle Comes Home starts during The Conjuring, which is the little part of
Right.
the sequence, but then takes place after The Conjuring.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
72, so
Okay.
it's the year after the events of the movie.
Fair
So
enough.
it's actually the second time then that this has happened. So the revenge tour is Annabelle Comes Home. Anyway,
Gotcha.
to your point, the Bathsheba sequence at the end is one of the most terrifying and just like in your face sequences. I think a part of it is the performance. I think a part of it is the way it's shot, and I think the other part of it is the performances around it. I think that Vera, Patrick, and Ron spend a lot of time really elevating an already great performance from Lily Taylor.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so interesting is the way that I watch it, it just feels visceral. And I think that their fear, it's kind of what I brought up earlier with Joey King in the sequence involving Nancy and Cindy and like the door. There's something about this idea of the performances carrying the horror. And I think that because they're reacting to a thing that we are also reacting to, and if they feel as scared on screen as we're feeling watching it, I think it actually kind of amplifies
Yeah.
because
100%.
we're already unnerved. We're already scared. We're already being pushed. And I think that Lily just really gets it. And there's something very, the demon feels so much like it's ready to just destroy everything around it. And
Right.
so like it's willing to tear this family apart. It's willing to destroy this person. It's willing to kill everything in its path, basically.
Yeah.
And there's this like human drama of, you know, now Patrick Wilson's having to do the exorcism and he's not even like supposed to do this, and he's
Right.
breaking Catholic law to do it essentially, and he doesn't want Lorraine anywhere near it, but she's not going to leave him.
Right.
And now Roger's kind of caught in the middle of all this, and they're kind of keeping him there, but they're also trying to keep the girls as far away from all this as possible. And it just, the pieces had all been put into place in such a way that once this scene happens, you're really rooting for it to work, but it's also just so terrifying. And there's something about the makeup and the eyes, that the way that Bathsheba looks and the way that Lily Taylor plays Bathsheba in this, not playing Carolyn, is just fucking terrifying.
It is so terrifying. And they have everything going on too. You also have the Drew looking for April upstairs, which is like not as terrifying, but still adds to the whole sequence of horror in a way. My favorite part, though, I gotta say, is that moment where Ed decides to do the exorcism.
Yes.
Like, you know, he like, we can't wait. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Like, you know, he has to do it, but he still doesn't want to. And he decides, okay, I'm gonna do it, and you're gonna leave. And then she's like, I'm not leaving. And she comes up to him in this probably the strongest performance of the film, at least from her, if not the whole film. Lily Taylor's maybe a little bit higher. She has that line where she goes, God put us together for a reason. This is it.
Yep.
And it's not about, it wasn't this whole like, you know, almost expected a, well, maybe this is it. God put us together for a reason. This might be, she was so definitive. God put us together for a reason. This is it. And she convinces Ed, and Ed, to his credit, at that point, doesn't even argue anymore. Let's do this thing. And they get it on, they make it work. Even though they're not quite as skilled in the exorcism angle of things. It's a very powerful moment. And I also want to recommend, like, I want to throw out there, it's really cool to see Ron Livingston's performance during this as well. It was been so easy to go over the top either way, where like, sort of like rah rah, or no, they're gonna kill her, you gotta stop it. No, he just played the scared husband. It was a genuine reaction by a scared husband, not sure what to do. And so he kind of did what he thought was right, which in this case was probably better than not doing anything at all.
I 100% am with you. And like the thing about a guy like Ron Livingston is, who, by the way, I think is massively talented. I've always liked his work, but he's also very known for being comedic. And so it could have been easy to see him getting lost in a performance like this and being over the top. But again, I think that the great thing about this movie is that there's so much grounded in reality, in only like, I guess, a hyper reality, if you will, because I guess there's only so much realisticness you can bring to the table in a movie that's dealing with the paranormal, but you still feel it. You still really buy into this world. And I think that it really, I've said it all night. It's the performances. It really is. These performances are great. And he really anchors this as like the loving husband who wants nothing more than for his wife to come out on the other side of this.
Right.
I just think he's so fucking good.
He is. And I love the fact that, like, the whole movie, he's having financial problems. That's actually well drawn out. Or he's not getting the work you want to get, getting half rated and everything else. But it never feels like it overwhelms the movie. It's not about that. It just happens to be that he's having financial difficulty. That's just part of an equation. It doesn't make up the whole character, which it could very easily well have done to a lot of characters.
I think that that's one of the great things about the movie, to your point, actually, is that they never really let what's happening overwhelm the movie. They just happen to be the things that are happening to these characters, and it just works so well. And it continues to work so well. And that's why I think the movie continues to hold up, actually, in hindsight, is that you just go on these journeys. These are normal people like you and I. Their problems are the same problems that we're having, even to this day. Financial, strained relationships, the idea of being a teenager who moves. Like, we all deal with these things, and yet at the same time, the reason it's so great is because those things seem all trivial when a fucking demon gets involved. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
That sounds weird to say it that way, but that really is what it is. It almost becomes trivial, and you realize how little any of that matters when you have demons attacking your family.
Good point. Good to note. And on that note, I want to ask you, where do you rank this film? It's 1 to 11, of course. You always turn up to 11 here on PLD Projects. Where would you rank The Conjuring?
I mean, look, man. I think this is a near perfect movie.
Okay.
I think unlike Scream, though, I think Scream has an absolutely banger perfect film in its arsenal, and it always will. I think The Conjuring never got fully to that, like, peak perfect movie.
Okay.
It got very close. There's little things here and there in the movie that, you know, it's just an outside thing. I love the movie, but I don't think it's like Scream's levels of, you know, you are perfect. So I think I'm going to give this bad boy, I'm going to give this one a 10.
A 10. Okay. Perfect. I, on the other hand, impressively enough, I'm going to go a little higher.
Interesting.
I'm giving it a 10.5.
I thought about doing that, and I thought you'd make fun of me, to be honest with you.
Don't ever worry about that. I will make fun of you. I'll always make fun of you because that's part of our relationship.
Oh, that's true.
Always give it what you think you should get. I think 10.5 is a near perfect film for me. I saw a 3.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I don't care. I think it's a nearly perfectly crafted horror film for me.
I'm going to bump it up to the 10.5.
All right. I'll let you do that as well.
Because I think that, my minor nitpicks aside, it's just too fucking good.
Yeah.
I love this movie, man. I keep going back to it. I've gone back to it a couple times a year since it came out. Like, I've seen this movie close to 50 times probably since its opening weekend.
Yeah, probably about that. That makes sense.
I love it. I think it's so good. I'm really glad that this was a series that we decided to talk about, because I think that there's a lot that it does. I think there's a lot that it has to say. We didn't really talk about it, but there really is this idea of faith that's really kind of important to the series, I think, as a whole. And it's very interesting to me because I grew up in a very religious family. I grew up fairly religious myself, only to find myself totally, like, leaving that behind.
Right.
And I have no faith really in like a higher power or religion or anything. And yet I find myself so fascinated that this series revolves around two people who seemingly poured all of that into their lives, and they, like, it clearly, at least as far as the movies are concerned, but even in life, as far as we could tell, that seemed to carry them. Yeah. And that's a kind of beautiful thing in a way. And I think that this movie really puts forth this idea that like faith and love can really take you far. And I think that's actually a really great message. I don't necessarily buy into the faith side of it, but like I think that there's something really profound in a way, actually, that this isn't a movie that needs like a big third act bloodbath like a normal horror film, right? Like this isn't a Jason film, it's not a Michael film, there's none of that. This movie is literally going out of its way going, you know what, man, it's okay that like love just kind of perseveres in this, and your like own personal faith kind of perseveres in all this. Like there's something very special and actually kind of moving about that I think will continue to, especially this one, and I think even The Conjuring 2, it really stands out in that regard, because films don't have those messages very frequently.
Right. You're right. It's a beautiful story of faith. It's a beautiful story of love. The center of both. And you know what? At the end of the day, with a scary movie, sometimes a positive message like that is very important and does it well.
No, it really is. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up, because we kind of weirdly glossed over, there's some really great creature effect stuff in this movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We brought up the Bathsheba one in particular, but even like the creepy hands were one thing.
Yep.
The creepy nurse thing is another. But there is a sequence where Carolyn is it Carolyn or one of the daughters? I think it's Carolyn. She gets attacked by the demon that claps out from the closet.
The closet. Yep. Right before the
I guess it's more of a wardrobe.
Yeah,
like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Armoire, I think it's called.
If it was fucking evil,
right?
And the way that the person or creature or whatever, however they did it, it's got to be a person in makeup. But the way that the body is contorted on the top and like is looking, and it looks so fucking scary and menacing, and just it is always creeped me out. It might be one of the scariest images in the movie.
Yeah,
and it's just because of the way that it makes that sound of like the weird like ethereal screaming. It still freaks me out, and I have seen this movie so many times. Like I said,
I get you on that. Absolutely. Like the idea is, like, to me, I think that less is more, and but he follows that to a T in this film because of the realism, or I should say real, but the realism, quote unquote. But there's not many special effects, no splatter things, but what they do use, and they use sparingly, and it makes it work even better, I think.
Right. I mean, even when you look at the sequence you brought up in the house where they're battling the demon and Annabelle at the same time, like that shot of the chair like rocking back and forth is so unnerving. And just like the doll just sitting on the lap, and there's just something so. It's these little images, these little creature effects, the chair going across the room. Like they really hone in on these. How do we take stuff that makes people scream and turn it up just enough that like you're really fucking petrified, but we're not really changing the formula. We're just twisting the knife a little more than we would. And I've always liked that. Even the first time that Carolyn is, we see the youngest one of the parents that has the invisible friend, and she's like, "Do you want to meet my friend? Here, look at the music box."
Right.
And so she's like, "Once the music stops, you'll see them behind you."
Right.
And you're like, "Pardon the fuck?"
Right. Exactly.
What that happened? And yeah, like if I'm the mother, that's the moment I go, "We're leaving."
Yeah. Bye-bye.
But she's
that.
Yeah, but at the time, stuff hasn't gotten totally out of hand, so she's buying into the not the hysterics, but the delusions, if you will, of a small child's imagination. Only for you're waiting for it to happen, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and then the daughter is the one who scares her, and it's like a perfect buildup of a jump scare.
So good.
It works really well, and that's the other thing. I hear this a lot, and I don't understand it. There's a lot of people who think that this movie is just full of jump scares, and I really want to say, before we leave from all this, I could not disagree more.
Right.
This movie is all about the tension. This movie is all about the way that it builds to the scares. Not every one of the scares in this movie, for me personally, is a jump scare. Is there some? Sure. I think the hand clapping one actually is a great usage of a jump scare.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that a lot of the terror in this movie is actually built into the things that are happening. The armoire, I butchered that word.
Armoire.
Yeah, the wardrobe.
Yes.
The wardrobe scare is not a jump scare.
No.
None of that's a jump scare. It's just fucking scary.
It is exactly
in the same
right.
way with the witch hanging from the tree. The goat when she's putting up the laundry. What a great effect. The one towel or blanket falls and there's like it catches on a body that you don't see. There's the shape of a human and then it flies off.
Right.
Like just the things like that where it just adds to the atmosphere. It adds to the mystery of the film. It adds to the overall sense of dread. That's the thing about this movie. It's just kind of an unrelenting feel of dread, but it's a weird version of that where I don't hate that. Like it works because I actually really enjoy it. Like I'm having a great time.
Yes, exactly.
But it is kind of creepy.
I agree 100%. We're very much on the same page. The jump scares are very minimal, and they're not even that important. It's all about the long-term tone and feel, and Juan pulls it off completely successfully. So
it's the best, man. I really like this movie. I don't think the series quite ever
reaches these heights.
I have really strong feelings for the second one that a lot of people don't have, that I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
I am too, because actually I did like it. I want to see if I like it more the second time through, because it's only been once I watched it, so I think it would be interesting to see it again and see what happens.
I'm of the idea and the persuasion that I think as a character piece, it's even stronger than the first one. Overall, for the Warrens, I think that there's something that it really does well in just the building of their relationship, and I think that it really lets Ed get a chance to do more than he got with this one. So
yes, agreed.
It's very, very cool. If you've never seen The Conjuring 2 and you're gonna watch it because of this podcast, I'm super excited for you.
Yes, me too.
I also, and we'll get into it, I also think that The Conjuring 2 is James Wan's most Steven Spielberg-esque film.
Ooh, okay. All right. I'm really interested in rewatching this. I didn't have these feels when I first saw it, but given a little time, given a little more intensity with my love for Steven Spielberg and a lot of other things Conjuring-wise, I'm interested to go back and see how I feel.
Yeah,
you're inspiring me.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to go back and watch it because we have Annabelle first.
We do.
Which, God help us all. But I'm excited for you to watch The Conjuring 2. I want you to keep the Spielberg of it all in mind in a lot of ways. But in particular, and it's the scene I'm going to talk about it once we get to it. But there's a brilliant scene that only Juan could pull off, and in another world, only Spielberg would have pulled off before, of stopping a movie so solidly in the middle of everything that's happening and letting a character decide to pull out a guitar and play a situation that is so fascinating to me.
It is very fascinating. But he uses skills for a good moment in the film. I agree.
So excited. I can't wait. I love these movies, and I'm really glad we got to talk about the first one.
Me too, man. Me too. All right. Well, where can the folks find you, my friend?
You guys know where to find me. Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell. Movie Trivia Showdown. Hey, we write the questions. Be nice to the writers. We're only human. You probably haven't heard that in a while. It's back. Season 9.
Hashtag Team Writers. Yes. And at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter. I mean, on PLD Project's YouTube channel, where we do Scoundrels every week at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. This week, actually, by the time you've heard this, last week it'll be, I will have debuted Crown Jewels, a journey through the catalog of Queen. That's where you can find me. And you can also find me in the Action Industries YouTube channel as well sometimes. And then you can just find me usually at the movies. So without further ado, what is that we say?
Stay mediocre. Don't try to do anything else. Just be the most mediocre version of you possible.
Never underestimate the power of mediocrity.
Correct.
Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.
PLD PJ Campbell. 2 mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are 2 Two Mediocre White Dudes on film.